must go. Doug Ford must go. Honestly, all the politicians in the running, they're all trash.
Do you think both sides have a right to defend themselves?
No.
I think it's safe to say that things aren't looking very good. It feels as though we're collectively staring down the barrel of World War III, and very few people are doing anything to stop it from happening. When you mix that in with a decades-long program of mass migration into Canada, extreme financial hardship being faced by Canadians across the country, and a more polarized and tribal nation divided along ethnic and religious lines without a unifying Canadian culture for us all to embrace, we are looking at what one might describe as a powder keg. For 2 nights in a row, massive pro-Palestine demonstrations have taken place outside the Israel consulate in downtown Toronto, where very emotional people accuse Israel of being murderers and of carrying out a genocide against Palestinians. Not only that, these people at the pro-Palestine demonstrations are very angry at Justin Trudeau and the Canadian government. They accuse Justin Trudeau of having the blood of innocent Palestinians on his hands. Just as we're seeing all over the world, large crowds of mostly immigrant Arabs are protesting in the streets after a bombing at a hospital in Gaza, which they blame Israel for. Israel denies all involvement and blames a misfired rocket fired from inside Gaza. But here's the situation in Canada. People in this country are very angry. They're very upset, not just at a foreign country on the other side of the world, but this country, Canada. They believe Canada is playing a role in the murder of their people in their home countries. This is a bad situation, and after being on the ground covering these protests for the past 2 days, although things remain peaceful now, I am convinced that they are only going to get worse. But on this episode of Ratioed, we spoke to the pro-Palestine protesters to get their side of the story, and we want you to hear what they have to say. So drop a like in the video, help us out by subscribing to the True North YouTube channel, stick around for the ratio of the week, and the comment question for the episode is this: should the Canadian government take a harsher stance toward the pro-Palestine protests happening across the country? Let me know in the comments, and let's get into it. Didn't Justin Trudeau relentlessly remind us that diversity is our strength as he imported millions of people into this country?
In Canada, diversity is our greatest strength.
Canadians get that diversity is and must be a source of strength. Canadians understand that diversity is our strength.
Well, it looks as though this diversity might not be exactly what Trudeau was talking about when he told us all it was going to be a strength for Canada.
Justin Trudeau, your hands are red!
Justin Trudeau, your hands are red!
And just days after the federal government decided to ban prayers at official Remembrance Day ceremonies, prayers for Canadians who gave up their lives for this country to defend the freedoms we have in this country, we saw mass Islamic prayers happening along Bloor Street, which was shut down for a protest during rush hour. Of course, this is totally acceptable, but praying at a Remembrance Day ceremony for Canadians who lost their lives, that, of course, doesn't fit with the multicultural vision presented to us by our Liberal government. For the second night in a row, large pro-Palestine demonstrations have taken over the Bloor-Yonge intersection in downtown Toronto, right outside the Israel consulate. This intersection is one of the busiest in the city and is likely going to be shut down for the next few days during rush hour as these demonstrations continue. It should be noted that these protests, despite requiring a very heavy police presence of riot police, tactical units, and mounted police, things have remained very peaceful. That being said, after spending time on the ground and talking to these people, there are quite a few things that stand out to me. For one, there are no Canadian flags anywhere. That's because even if we're being charitable to these pro-Palestine protesters, they don't seem to like this country very much. In fact, they accuse Canada and our politicians of being behind the murder of their people.
Canada, your hands are red!
And whatever you feel about the protests happening in Canada or the conflict happening right now between Israel and Hamas, what these protesters are expecting of Justin Trudeau is quite frankly ridiculous. Trudeau has already condemned what happened at the Gaza hospital as being unacceptable and saying that humanitarian law must be followed.
The news coming out of Gaza is horrific and absolutely unacceptable. International humanitarian and international law needs to be respected in this and in all cases. There are rules around wars.
But these protesters not only want Trudeau to condemn Israel for what they're doing to Gazan civilians, They want Trudeau to unequivocally stand on the side of Palestine, a side which refuses to condemn a listed terrorist organization in Canada, Hamas, which also happens to be run in Gaza since 2006. In fact, the people protesting in Toronto, as you will soon hear, believe that Hamas bears no responsibility for what's happening to Gazan civilians inside Gaza right now. Also, at several points throughout our coverage last night, we were confronted by people who told us that we had to get lost to leave and that we are far-right media trying to agitate the crowd. As you'll see from our interviews, that was not at all the case. At one point, pro-Palestine protesters defended us as a very angry person confronted my cameraman and I just for asking people fair questions.
I know who you are. I know who you are. I know who you are. You're an agitator.
Undoubtedly, there is a level of intimidation that these protesters try to employ when a journalist tries to explain what's happening on the ground at these protests. As soon as you start talking to the camera or interviewing someone, a large crowd of protesters will encircle you and listen to your every word. And if you say something that they don't like, they will tell you. I have covered many protests, and that tactic is not something I've seen employed anywhere else. Again, whatever you think about this conflict or whatever side you're on, there are things we know to be true. Thousands of civilians, whether they are Jewish, whether they are Muslim, whether they are Palestinian or they're Israeli, are dead. It's terrible, it's horrible, and nobody should be cheering on the killing of innocent civilians or justifying it in any way. One civilian casualty is not better or worse than another civilian casualty just because of the country that they come from. War is hell, and everyone should be able to pray for peace without being accused of supporting one side or the other. And as you'll see from the people protesting in the streets, that sentiment, despite whatever else is going on, is the overwhelming sentiment, that they don't want civilians to die. Here's what the pro-Palestine protesters have to say about what's going on in their own words. What brings you guys out here today?
Today we're out here and we're preaching for the genocide of our people that have been under oppression for the last 75 years, our people who have had no freedom and no justice, and our people that are crying and screaming for our help, and yet no one wants to listen.
To stop the genocide, to stop the killing, to stop the hate, to stop the violence. That's what brings us here, because this is not only my cause, it's not the Palestinian cause, it's not the Arab cause, it's a humanitarian cause. We want the killing, we want the hate, we want the violence to stop on all sides, on all parties. We don't want anybody to die. No more civilians dying, no more Palestinians dying, no more Israelis, no more Jews, no more Muslims, no more dying. Just cease the fire, stop. All wars can get accomplished on tables, not by killing.
We are here just to tell the whole world that we will not go down. We are standing for our rights. We are spreading the truth about what's going on in Gaza.
I'm here today to protest for human rights for the Palestinian children and mothers, and to be honest, for humanity, for the Muslims, the Jews, and the Christians who are being killed in Palestine.
Obviously, you believe that the response from the Israel government has been disproportionate toward Gaza. In your opinion, I know it's a tough position to be put in, but in your opinion, what would a proportionate response look like for Israel for what happened 11 days ago?
Are we talking about proportional with math and calculation? Because if we're talking about proportional, then we're never gonna stop killing each other.
We've heard people here chant that Justin Trudeau has blood on his hands, and a lot of people obviously hold the Canadian government responsible. We've also seen Trudeau say that the bombing at the hospital was unacceptable and everybody has to follow international humanitarian law. So in particular, what would you guys like to see the Canadian government do?
At the end of the day, it's not just the Canadian government, it's the entire Western government, whether it be Canada or the States. We sit as people and we pay our taxes and we fight for the rights of the Ukrainians. We fought for the rights in the Holocaust, and this is Holocaust once more. And no one wants to say anything. Justin Trudeau was admiring the Israeli government, the IDF, for what they did in the first 3 days. But once they bomb a hospital, that's when he wants to come on our side. He can't keep switching sides.
He's saying unacceptable, but in the meantime, they are standing 100% with Israel. Do you see the picture? So is that acceptable for you or for anybody to stand to pick and choose and to say this is unacceptable? But we are standing beside Israel, and Israel has the right to defend their existing. That's bullshit.
I want him to come out and take Israel accountable for their actions. Say anything that's remotely related to Israel committing this genocide that we've all seen. The entire world is seeing what they're doing. And Trudeau hasn't said one thing at all condemning Israel's actions for the past 75 years.
There are no winners in war. That's why Canada, that's why Justin Trudeau has blood on their hands. I came here 21 years ago, and this country gave my family an opportunity. It gave me an education, it gave me a home, a safe home, where my people weren't getting killed. And now, they're feeding the terrorists. They're not taking care of our own people here on land. They're not taking care of our schools. They're not taking care of our hospitals. And I'm talking way before COVID. Way before COVID. Our homeless people here, people are on drugs. They have no places to go. Trudeau must go. Biden must go. Doug Ford must go. Honestly, all the politicians in the running, they're all trash.
Do you think Hamas has to take any responsibility for what's happened to Palestinians over the past week?
Well, without any sort of resistance, you can pretty much say that Palestine will be wiped out. Ever since 1948, we've been resisting, we've been fighting for our lands, fighting for change in Palestine and other countries too as well, like Saudi Arabia, Lebanon, other countries. We've all been protesting, we've all been wanting our governments to take steps to change the situation of the Palestinians.
Do you think both sides have a right to defend themselves?
No, we are under occupation. They are the occupied. They are the one who's controlling the sea, controlling the food, controlling the land. How you can equal between somebody who put them in a prison and the prisoner? Are there an equal equation here? By itself is injustice. I am the one who are under fire. I am the one who are under occupation since 1948. Is that a clear picture for you?
At the end of the day, ever since 9/11, any single Arab that wants to fight for the freedom of their people is labeled as a terrorist. Any single Arab that wants to speak the truth of their people is justified as a terrorist. We are not terrorists. If a white person or any other person came down here to speak for the freedom of their people, this would be labeled as a protest. This would be labeled as a peaceful thing. But when it comes to Arabs, this is terrorism. We're sitting here peacefully. In Islam, the murder of innocent people is wrong. Bombing hospitals is wrong. We don't do that. And to say Gaza and Hamas were the ones that did it is completely incorrect. We sit here and we want to justify it, and the Western media portrays us as the terrorists. They've been terrorists for years. They are the terrorists. They killed people in Afghanistan and in Syria and in Libya and in many other Middle Eastern countries and justified it off of 9/11. We are not terrorists. We will never be terrorists.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Although things remain peaceful for now, I wouldn't expect that to continue. Things in Israel look like they're only going to get worse, as a ground offensive seems imminent. The anger at Israel and directed at the Canadian government is only going to increase as more civilians die, which of course seems horribly inevitable. And we've already seen what happens at these protests in other parts of the world. In Berlin, 65 police were injured at a pro-Palestine protest as organizers called to burn everything. We've already seen leaders in other parts of the world call to ban pro-Palestine protests from happening. And I would assume that politicians in Canada will soon start doing the same thing. It also should be noted that it's unsustainable to be able to shut down the largest intersection in the city for several nights in a row during rush hour. At some point, the city will eventually have to say, you can't do this at Bloor-Yonge. So I'm afraid this is not looking like it's going to end well. All right, here's the ratio of the week. The winner is Chrystia Freeland for this absurd take. She wants to remind all Canadians that actually she is going to be the one who's going to make sure banks treat Canadians fairly. Not, of course, like she was the one who told banks to freeze accounts for people who dared to protest the government. Take a look at this. Whether it is ensuring Canadians have access to affordable banking options and are not subjected to unfair fees, or making sure they receive the mortgage relief they need in times of distress, we will continue working to ensure Canadians are treated fairly by their banks. Oh, sure you will, Chrystia Freeland. 1,670 replies to only 420 likes. It seems as though no matter what Chrystia Freeland writes on social media, Canadians just don't believe a word of it. Chrystia Freeland, the minister responsible for freezing the bank accounts of Canadians she didn't like, is also the minister in charge of making sure that Canadians are treated fairly by their banks. You can't make this stuff up. Laughable and ironic. By the way, that comment got over 1,200 likes. Communism replacing the free market? You are also making sure that you can shut down their bank accounts if they want to protest your fascist policies. There, fixed it for you. Yikes. Rough day there for Chrystia Freeland. Do they really expect Canadians to forget that they froze the bank accounts of peaceful protesters? Just incredible. All right, everyone, that's going to do it for us this week on the show. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Harrison Faulkner, and this is Ratioed.